Tonight we have part 2 of 4 parts, and the second part of the series is called Beyond the Centralization of Consciousness, and it will be delivered to you by Michele Shields and Pablo Sender. Please welcome Michele and Pablo.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for showing up on the web. Like Joe said, this is the second part of 4. Tonight's talk will cover the first deprivation and the first acquisition. You guys should have these diagrams. This first acquisition and first deprivation is, like we said last time, it's what we need to cultivate, the acquisition, not so much acquire, but what we need to cultivate. And then the other part, the deprivation, is what we need to refuse to think of as reality. And so these two things, tonight's talk has to do with the universality of consciousness, or what the title says, beyond the centralization or the focalization of consciousness. So HPB says that the monads, even when connected with the lower principles, know neither space nor time, but are diffused throughout the former, are omnipresent and ubiquitous.
So for those who are not familiar with the Theosophical language, the idea of monads, it comes from the word, the Greek word monas, that means one. So it's the divine spark, the center of consciousness in each of us. Now, as we are going to see during the talk, the problem is that we feel that we are enclosed in this particular body, and that we are here and not there. But what Blavatsky says is that the divine spark, even when the divine spark is incarnated, it is not limited to any particular point in space. On its own plane, in its own nature, the monad, the divine spark, is one with everything, is everywhere. But for some reason, as we are going to see, when it has to express through the body, it limits itself and loses this feeling of being one with everything.
The second quote says, "There is a man mending the road, and that man was myself."
So before we go on, this is an experience that Krishnamurti had of this unity of consciousness that shows it's like as an example of what any of us potentially can feel. This is a possibility in the human being, and the spiritual life has as an aim to be able to perceive in this way.
There was a man mending the road. That man was myself. The pickaxe he held was myself. The very stone which he was breaking up was a part of me. The tender blade of grass was my very being, and the tree beside the man was myself. I could also feel and think like the road mender, and I could feel the wind passing through the tree, and the little ant on the blade of grass I could feel. The birds, the dust, and the very noise were a part of me. I was in everything, or rather everything was in me, inanimate and animate, the mountain, the worm, and all breathing things. A lot of the quotes that are up here tonight are really good for seeds for meditation or seeds in daily life. Like we talked about in the last talk, that there's the ideal, which that's what this is, and then there's what we work up to getting towards, and all those little steps that we make in between. We talked about expanding a bubble and trying to encompass everything that is around us. That's a start to getting to feel this. Anything that I can do to feel outside of myself, then I'm taking a step towards being on this road.
So this first acquisition and deprivation that Blavatsky describes will give us some strategies to try to encourage this way of perceiving and this way of thinking of ourselves. As we are going to see, the concepts that we have about ourselves are not just concepts. They really limit consciousness. So the first thing that we need to do is to begin to break these concepts and build some other concepts that may be more in tune with reality.
This first acquisition, like I said, is really no different from the sitting meditation that we talked about unity. But what this is going to do is give us some things for daily life that we can add to it. So this is the first acquisition. On your sheets, you should be able to find it. It should be after, there should be a little line that says the normal state of consciousness must be molded by perpetual presence in imagination in all space and time. And then from this originates a substratum of memory which does not cease in dreaming or waking. Its manifestation is courage. With memory of universality, all dread vanishes during the dangers and trials of life. As you can see on the diagram, she breaks these things into 3 different parts. And what I think it is the first part, the part that says the normal state of consciousness, is what is the meditation, or what is we should be thinking about for our daily lives. The second part that from this originates a substratum is the concept, the thing that the thing we need to know in order to go on to the next step. And then the third step is what this looks like to us in our daily life, or what the result is.
We have seen in the previous talk, Blavatsky begins by talking about a sitting meditation on unity, trying to expand our awareness, embracing space and time, and even going beyond. And then she says, then your normal state of consciousness in your daily living should be molded by a series of attitudes. This is the first one. There are 3 of them that we are going to cover in the next classes. So the first one is this, trying to keep in imagination, in our thinking, or in a kind of intuitive feeling, the idea that we are in all space and time.
Okay, so the first part of the acquisition, the normal state of consciousness, must be molded by a perpetual presence in imagination in all space and time. HPB says here, you have to reach to that point when you feel yourself one with the whole and perfectly inseparable from it, from the one and the eternal, which has no end and no beginning.
So this, as Michele said, is an ideal, and it may seem like a tall order, or something difficult to attain. But the thing with the ideals is that they are not really far away from us. They are what we really are. The problem is that there is something that is blocking that kind of perception. So how are we going to work with these kind of ideals? And there is a quote by Nisargadatta Maharaj. We quoted him in the previous talk too. He was a sage, a modern sage in India, and he gives a hint as to how we can start practicing this.
Behave as if what I say is true, and judge by what actually happens. All I ask is the little faith needed for making the first step. With experience will come confidence, and you will not need me anymore. I know what you are, and I am telling you, trust me for a while. If, like Pablo said, from the beginning to the end isn't truly that far if we take it step by step. But if we think of going from one point, the beginning, to the end, or what it looks like, what I look like, or what I feel like today, and then you're telling me that I'm going to feel one with all. I can't even think about that. I can't even wrap my mind around it. My lower mind has no concept of what that will feel like. Because one of the things is, the first thing that we want to, or that my mind goes to, is, okay, we're a bunch of separate things, and we're going to all act in unison. But that's not what HPB is talking about. She's not talking about like an army, a bunch of separate who work together. She's talking about this unity where we are truly one, where there's no separation, there is no difference, we are the same, everything's homogeneous.
Yes, if you see what Nisargadatta here is saying, is behave as if this were true. That's the way we have to start. We have to start by trying. Many times in spirituality, we think that first we have to figure out how to do it before we can do it. And that is never the case. Of course, you need a certain theoretical foundation, but you will never know how we can perceive unity. All you can do is to try to do it, and then the ability will grow in you. It's like I always put the example of learning to ride a bicycle, because it's very basic, but it's how everything in life is. And if you had a bicycle, you don't know how to ride it, and then you ask me, okay, explain to me how to do it. And I can explain many things, and you may try to figure out every detail, but that is not going to give you the ability to do it. You cannot try to figure it out before you do it. You have to get on the bicycle and try it, and learn to maintain the equilibrium while you are there. So with this, again, it's the same. We shouldn't ask, okay, how can I do it? No, just try it, and then in the trying, you will little by little discover how. Just as you try to ride the bicycle, little by little you discover how to keep the balance. There is no way that can be taught in words.
The bicycle example, thank you, is the way I thought of it too. If I tell you while you're riding a bike that you have to hold the handlebars, you have to sit on the seat, you have to pedal, if you try to do those in that order, you'll never get it done. So the trying example of just getting on the bike, and all those things have to come together at one time. And some may come at first, faster than others, but once you get all that balance in together, then that bike really moves forward. All right, some more examples of this are.
Before you go.
Oh, yes.
I don't understand I'm not able to parse the top sentence.
Okay.
Can you say something
I'll repeat what he says. He doesn't understand what this has to do with the perpetual.
No. The sentence
I don't
itself.
understand what that sentence is.
Oh, okay. You understand the normal state of our consciousness, which is how we're acting every day, daily life. All right, must be molded by a perpetual presence. That perpetual means that it happens so often that it's constant there. And then in imagination, in all space and time.
So yeah, the idea is just, this will be a little clearer as we go into the deprivation. But the idea is that right now, for example, each one of us has the feeling that we are within the body and that we are in this particular place. Now, we saw in the experience of the mystics that is not the case. You could feel at this moment that you are the chair too, or that you are the tree that is outside. Why are you not feeling it? Human beings can do it. Many human beings have this perception. It's a possibility right now in our awareness. Why is it that we feel we are in this particular point in space? As we are going to see later, that's part of the conditioning in our perception. It's a habit. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves.
He's going to tell all the quotes that are coming.
But the idea of this is that the first thing we have to try to do is to have the feeling that we are everywhere. Yes, the body is here, of course, but we are not talking about the body. We are talking about what we really are. So even though the body is here, we have to try to constantly or perpetually have the sense that our presence is everywhere. So it's once you start trying it, it's a subtle feeling in which you are like feeling yourself, but yourself is not the complete focus of your consciousness. You are aware of your body, but there is like this feeling that there is something that goes beyond. And that's how the feeling begins. At the same time, you have to do some other things, as we are going to see.
So, must be molded in your imagination, a perpetual presence in all space and time?
Well, the consciousness must be molded. Blavatsky used presence in imagination, in the sense that at the beginning, you have to use like your imagination. You are not really feeling the perpetual presence in all space and time. So yes, and the idea of imagination, as we explained last week, is not just fancy. It's using your mind to try to generate a different view actively, and then the imagination is left behind, and the real perception comes. But the first step is to try to use your mind to generate the space so that because what is blocking that experience is an idea. So you are generating a different idea, like a medicine, to counteract the idea that we are the body. Now the imagination is not producing the experience that you are everywhere. That's what you are. The imagination is counteracting the idea that you are the body.
All right, so the first step is an extension from meditation on unity, the place of origin for timelessness and spacelessness, a state of homogeneity. In general, we are identified with the content of consciousness. When you watch your emotions and your thoughts, there comes little by little a sense that you are the space that contains this movement of consciousness. This is a subtle feeling where you feel you are embracing everything. You are the particulars.
You are not.
You are not the particulars. You are the container. Wherever you are in life, try to have this feeling, I am the container. Get outside yourself and stretch your soul. And these are just notes from us. So, so for this, we talked about last time that bubble, expand your bubble. When you walk out of your house, I used to tell my students to notice nature. You know, pick your head up and notice if the sun's shining, or if it's windy out, or if it's cold. A lot of times I know when I leave my front door, the next thing I notice is the frost on my windshield and my car door handle, and then the steering wheel, and that's it. And I don't notice anything else that's going on beside me. So that's one little activity that we can do that will help expand ourselves, and that's what I put the stretch your soul.
Yeah, and that's very important because we tend to live in this state of self-centeredness, where, as Michele says, we are aware only of our little sphere, personal space. So by watching outside, by looking, by opening up the perception, that's the first step. In the act of being aware of what is out there, we are immediately expanding our perception. And that is very important. Otherwise, you know, we go like in a tunnel.
Tunnel vision.
Yeah, in a tunnel where that tunnel goes to the little places that we want to get, like the handle of the door, and then and we live in this constrained kind of consciousness.
Okay. All right, so the second part, the concept per se, is from this originates a substratum of memory which does not cease in dreaming or waking. Its manifestation is courage. This substratum is important to me because it's that base from which we naturally act from a place of unity. It's a place where when someone asks us to help or someone asks us to do something, we don't think, how is it going to benefit me? How, am I going to be able to do this? We just naturally act. And that's when we're able to tap into our higher self instead of working from our lower self. That substratum is always there. It's always been there. It always will be there. We just have to figure out how to take away that junk that is stopping us from accessing it on a regular basis. To me, it's a really nice place to get to because you no longer have to think. I no longer would have to say, should I do this or should I do that? Is this the right thing to do? Is this the right thing to say in this point? My whole being will therefore be acting from this place of unity, and I'll be able to move more effortlessly through life.
Yes, as we try to do this, that in your memory, this intuitive feeling of unity begins to be formed in your memory. I think the idea of memory is like when we say, for example, we try to do a spiritual practice and then we forget during the day. We try to be aware and then we forget. There is this forgetting that is a problem for the spiritual practice. So with the practice that Blavatsky is saying, we generate like this memory that you could also call it awareness, like this presence in your mind of the feeling of unity. At the beginning it's subtler and then it may increase and be more evident, but little by little, without you noticing it, your way of looking at life will change. And again, gradually, and then you begin to act from this almost unconscious presence of a feeling of unity. And then the manifestation of that is courage, and we are going to see why too.
Right, and the second part of that, fear comes from a feeling of separateness. And when we feel separate, when we feel isolated, when we feel it's me and you, or us and them, then that fear can take hold. So if we can get to this place, the substratum, then that courage is there naturally. And at the bottom, Nisargadatta says, you will recognize that you have returned to your natural state by a complete absence of all desire and fear. It's that state of fearlessness that we can act from on a moment-to-moment basis. Clara Codd says, a master of wisdom once put it, courage belongs to the immortal soul. The mortal body knows only the law of self-preservation. And C.W. Leadbeater says here, when we know quite certainly that we are part of a whole, we do not so much mind where this particular fragment of it may be, or through what experiences it may be passing. This is important to me, or I thought, because so many times in life we think we should be here, or we think we should be doing this, or we think we should be with this sort of person or this group, and we find ourselves not there, and we find ourselves not that people around us aren't acting the way we want them to, or I'm not doing the job I want to do, or I'm not parenting like I want to do. It'll be nice to get to that place to know that where I am, I mean, there's all those nice little sayings, you're perfect with who you are, you're perfect with right where you are, but I don't feel perfect. So to get to that point where I know wherever I am in the right place, will be a nice change of pace.
Yes, and that comes, as the quotes talk about, comes from the feeling that this body is just one part of what we really are. And when you take it as a concept, it looks artificial. But the feeling is exactly like that, is when your body, your personality, occupies the whole field of your consciousness, of course it is extremely important. But as your consciousness expands, then what happens to the body, to the personality, begins to have less and less weight. And that's how you experience it. Again, all this is experienced gradually. The lack of fear doesn't happen from one day to the other. But little by little, there is less fear because there is less concern with the separate person. So as you go through this, and consciousness begins to embrace or to expand, you probably won't notice much objectively, but what will happen is that you are less concerned with what your personality is doing. So, you are here, you would prefer to be there, but it's not a big deal. You just don't feel it to be a big deal. And before, because that was the only focus of your consciousness, it was really important. So gradually, these things begin to disappear. First, the more superficial, and then the ones that are deeper.
Okay. We'll go now to the first deprivation. Okay, so flip it's on the other side of your page, and it's a constant refusal to think of reality of separations and meetings, associations with places, times, and forms. This prevents futile longings, expectations, sad memories, or brokenheartedness. And this is the same thing, or I saw the same thing as in the acquisition. The first part is the meditation, or the daily living, the attitude, and part of the concept is in there. And then the second part is what it looks like once you're able to refuse to think of the reality of.
So as you see in the diagram of meditation, Blavatsky is working on the positive and negative way or approach. Positive in the sense of you are trying to build something, you are trying to cultivate something, that is this feeling of being in all space and time. And then the negative approach, when you are trying to eliminate something or to let go of something. And these two are complementary. So first, you are, on one hand, you are trying to feel you are in all space and time. On the other hand, you refuse to believe that it is real, or that the experience of being separated or being associated with places and times and forms, you refuse to believe that that is real. Again, the body is in one particular place, is associated with a bunch of people or situations, and the body is limited. But you refuse to believe that that is all you are, that that is your reality. As we saw, consciousness is far beyond that.
And she says here, a constant refusal to think of the reality, not a constant refusal to think, or not a constant refusal to have thoughts or have emotions or have those desires, but to detach ourselves from those feelings, those thinkings, those thoughts, and those desires. So that's a real important part. They're going to come. Just because our evolutionary state, as our evolutionary state is right now, we don't really have the tools per se to not have those things come in. That's something that is more of one of those ideals, or we can get closer to that.
Yes, as we are going to see that by the end of the talk, but the attitude that you have to cultivate here is you see all these things appear and you say, okay, I see you, and I refuse to believe your reality. I know that this is something that my body is bringing, or my mind or my emotions, but because of my study, because of my meditation and my practice, I know it is not real, even if the thought is here. So you recognize it, and you just drop it, and you go on with your life.
All right. Krishnamurti, I believe, is the one who uses this term, focalization of consciousness. I am all that, the past and the present and the projected future. When you say you are a Hindu and I am a Muslim, there is a focalization of consciousness through identification with the personality.
So consciousness is just what we were saying. Consciousness is not centralized or focused on the body, on the personality, until we start defining ourselves, until we start saying, I am this personality, this name, this family, etc.
And one of the other things that I thought was important, if you think conceptually that our lower nature on this physical plane is limited. I can only have so much money. If I have money, then I'm taking it away, or resources, then I'm taking it away from somebody else. They're not able to use that. If you think globally. But our higher nature, by its very natural state, is a unitive, and the things that are in there are not limited. So there is plenty of love, there is plenty of compassion, there is plenty of space, there is plenty of time. It's not limited as it is here in the physical plane with our personality.
Yes, and the more love you feel, you are not taking love from the environment. On the contrary, you are reproducing that. The more joy you feel, you are reproducing that, as opposed to the physical things. The more I grab, the more I'm taking away from others, as Michele said.
Okay, so Nisargadatta says here, when you are bound by the illusion, I am this body, you are merely a point in space and a moment in time. When the self-identification with the body is no more, all space and time are in your mind, which is a mere ripple in consciousness, which is awareness reflected in nature.
If you see these words are talking about basically a psychological problem. They talk about this focalization of consciousness, this idea I am this body, this identification. And that is a very interesting point. It's not necessarily something objective, it's a psychological problem. It's just like when we watch a movie. We watch a movie, we know that the actors are being paid, we know that what they are doing is not real, and yet we identify with the movie, with the actors, and we reproduce in ourselves their feelings. If they are sad, we are sad. If they are in love, we are in love. If they are happy, we are happy. So consciousness has this amazing ability of identifying and reproducing in itself something that doesn't belong to consciousness itself, or at least to that center of consciousness. So this is what happens. Our divine spark gets identified with the body, with the emotions, with the mind, and assumes that identity. Our consciousness that is really beyond that and is using the mind, the emotions, and the body to express on this plane, begins to assume all those attributes. And then that is where the problem arises, because it forgets its boundless nature, its perfect and harmonious nature, and it takes on all the limitations of the body, the emotions, and the mind. So it's a problem, a psychological problem, if you want to put it in that way.
Mohini Chatterjee was a disciple in India.
Yeah, of the masters.
Of the masters, sorry. And he writes, the starting point of the pantheistic, we use the word for want of a better one, system of morality is a clear perception of the unity of the one energy operating in the manifested cosmos.
So first, this perception of unity.
The principal obstacle to the realization of this oneness is the inborn habit of man of always placing himself at the center of the universe. Whatever a man might act, think, or feel, the irrepressible I is sure to be the central figure. This, as will appear on the slightest consideration, is that which prevents every individual from filling his proper sphere in existence, where he only is exactly in place and no other individual is.
So see, he talks about an inborn habit of placing always ourselves in the center. So he talks about habit, again, a mental problem. This reminds me the limitations that our concepts can produce. I read once that at a certain point in time, science didn't believe that human beings could run faster than an x velocity. And then no runner really could break that speed, because it was a known fact in them that they couldn't do it. Until one did it, until one went beyond what the science of the time thought was possible, and after that, people start breaking the records. So you see how unconsciously this belief was limiting even a physical performance. So this habit, this belief that we are this body, is limiting the perception of consciousness. Therefore, the whole diagram is trying to break the habit of perception.
So, Nisargadatta says again, as long as you do not see that it is mere habit, built on memory, prompted by desire, you will think of yourself to be a person. And Krishnamurti adds, I have been seeing only this fragment, pointing to the portion of the carpet. My whole life has been spent in observing the fragment. You come along and say this is part of the whole. This would not exist if the other did not exist. I cannot take my eyes off this fragment. I agree that this can only exist because of the whole carpet, but I have never looked at the whole carpet. I have never moved away from this, and I do not know how to remove my eyes and look at the whole carpet.
So that is more or less a place in which we are. And all these systems and the questioning of this and the practice is a way to learn how to remove our eyes from the fragment, from the corner.
Okay, here are some more quotes that are good seeds for meditation. As the body, you are in space. As a mind, you are in time. But you are mere body with a mind in it. Have you ever investigated it? Then go beyond I am the body idea, and you will find that the space and time are in you and not you in space and time. Once you have understood this, the main obstacle to realization is removed.
See that the language is very similar to the quote in Mohini. Mohini also said the main obstacle to realization is this inborn habit of regarding ourselves as being in this point of space, which is the same that Nisargadatta is saying. That's the main obstacle to realization.
The voice of the silence says, for mind is like a mirror. It gathers dust while it reflects. It needs the gentle breezes of soul wisdom to brush away the dust of our illusions. Seek, O beginner, to blend the mind and the soul. And isn't it Krishnamurti who says you have to keep brushing that dust off the mirror? All right, so these constant, the perpetual presence is that brushing of the dust.
Yeah, we constantly are drawn into the idea that we are the body. So there has to be like a constant, cleaning of the mirror of the mind, so that we can remind ourselves that even though my body is here as consciousness, we are not limited to the body.
And Nisargadatta says this a couple times. He says this, refuse all thoughts except one, the thought I am. The mind will rebel in the beginning, but with patience and perseverance, it will yield and keep quiet. Once you are quiet, things will begin to happen spontaneously and quite naturally without any interference on your part. And this is where we talked about, I believe, setting a timer, or every time the phone rings, try to get out of your body. Try to picture yourself up above the room and see the whole room as it's going on, or set a timer on your phone, or just every time you walk outside, make something part of that, and then just throw that in. I am. Just throw that in, because that's all he's saying to do is in the beginning just throw it in and then see where it goes from there.
Yeah, when Michele says out of the body, she's not talking about astral projection.
Oh, sorry, no.
And out of the body experience.
Right.
But see that he also talks about refusing. Remember that Blavatsky in the deprivation says a constant refusal to think of the reality of decentralization, for example. So he says the same. Refuse these thoughts. They will come. Refuse them and just drop them. And then when he talks about the thought of I am, is the thought of I am as opposed to I am Pablo. There is a fact, the fact that I am, I exist. Now, when I say I am Pablo, then I am identifying myself with this particular personality, body, mind. So when he talks about the thought of I am is this abstract feeling of I just exist, not necessarily as a body, or not only as a body. I have an existence that is beyond that.
Okay. All right. The next part here, the elementals. I wanted to put this part in. I asked Pablo to think of a way to put this in, because as Nisargadatta says here, the mind will rebel. You will notice, not necessarily when we think of making changes, like the example I gave last week, that when I couldn't gossip or complain or talk about nonsense thing, my mind was, I could see it moving, trying to catch up, trying to find something that I could talk about, because it wasn't used to that silence. So I was wondering, I was curious, what is that? If it's not me, it feels like it's me, it's happening to me. So I wanted to talk about the elementals, because that's what it is. It's those energies. Those elementals are forces of nature. They're elemental energies that eventually will evolve into other life forms through the evolutionary scheme of things. But at this point in time, all they do is do their thing. They react. that when I'm not talking about people anymore, or I'm not doing those things, those elementals are hungry. It's like that 2-year-old child that wants attention, so it's moving inside of me. And I have to realize that that's all it is. It's not me. It's not my consciousness. It's not my thoughts that want to do these things. It's these elemental forces.
Yeah, in the Theosophical view, everything is alive. So our body has its own intelligence. We know that the body has its own intelligence. And in Theosophy, we say that this is a physical, elemental consciousness that is a consciousness of the body. And because the physical elemental has in charge to maintain the body, it will always tend to react in a self-protective way, in a self-centered way, defending the body, attacking the other so that you are not hurt. It's a natural tendency of the intelligence of the body. And the emotions too, they have their own intelligence. We think that we are the ones that produce the emotions. But then if you look at the emotions, you can see how they are alive, they have their own life. If it were we the ones that produce them, then we should be able to not be angry when we don't want to be angry. And even if we don't want to be angry, the anger is there. So in the Theosophical view, our body, our emotions, our mind, they have their own life, their own consciousness. I always say our consciousness is using the body, the emotions, and the mind, but as a vehicle of expression. But this vehicle of expression is not like a car, that you just sit on the car and you take the car whenever you want. It's more like riding a horse. The horse has its own consciousness, its own tendencies and desires, and you have to tame the horse before the horse will take you where you want. So the body, the emotions, the mind also is like a living entity, and we are trying to express ourselves through this living entity, which at this point in evolution is still not tamed. So you will see you want to do the right thing, and you still will see the emotions or the thoughts to do the opposite. And it's not you as a pure consciousness. It is the consciousness of your vehicles.
And I remember one time being on vacation, and all of a sudden I felt this sadness, and I was at a very nice place, and there was no reason I should have sadness. And I was watching people come off a boat that was a shuttle. And the sadness stayed with me, and I couldn't figure out where it came from, how to get rid of it, what's going on. And then I remember sitting down to lunch, and all of a sudden this cutest little old lady in her red polyester suit with this bright red flowered polyester shirt walked by, and instantly my mood changed, and I was in a really good mood then. And I thought, you know what, it must have been the people that I was around, or the situation that I was in. I could feel that at that point in time. And so when I found the Theosophical Society and found this word elementals and what they were, it was really kind of nice. It's that anxiety you have, and you're standing there going, why do I feel anxious? I shouldn't feel anxious. And when I started working on that process, that anxiety goes away.
Mm-hmm. And that's why what Blavatsky is saying as a method here is to refuse the thoughts, because as we are going to see, the thoughts come from the elementals. They don't come from you.
Okay, so at the feet of the Master, under the first chapter of discrimination, the physical elementals are explained. Do not mistake your bodies for yourself, neither the physical body, nor the astral, nor the mental. Each one of them will pretend to be the self in order to gain what it wants. When there is work that must be done, the physical body wants to rest, to go out walking, to eat and drink. And the man who does not know says to himself, I want to do these things, and I must do them. When your body wishes something, stop and think whether you really wish it. So I think my apartment was never the cleanest that it was, except for the times that I had to study for tests. So, and those were those elementals reacting to doing.
Probably the mental elemental would say the physical, if you don't put this in order, I cannot work.
I cannot work. That's exactly what it says. All right, so the other part from the chapter at the Feet of the Master says, the astral body has its desires, dozens of them. It wants you to be angry, to say sharp words, to feel jealous, to be greedy for money, to envy other people, their possessions, to yield yourself to depression. All these things it wants, and many more, not because it wishes to harm you, but because it likes violent vibration and likes to change them constantly. But you want none of these things, and therefore you must discriminate between your wants and your bodies. Your mental body wishes to think itself proudly separate, to think much of itself and little of others. When you meditate, it will try to make you think of many different things which it wants instead of the one thing which you want. You are not this mind, but it is yours to use. So here again, discrimination is necessary. You must watch unceasingly or it will fail.
So this is more or less a show of these lives that are living along with us, and that because of this identification, we get hung up to them. For example, there is a feeling of irritation. So when you say, I am irritated, then the whole problem begins. Then you are frustrated because you are irritated. Then you have to think, what can you do to counteract that, or to blame somebody? But if you see it as something external, you know, the emotional body is producing this because it didn't like something, then it's far easier to say, okay, you know, I hear you, but I don't care. Not right now, I have to do this. It's far easier to let it go, especially with practice. You know, at the beginning, because the identification is so strong and so close, you feel it is yourself. But as you try to practice all these things, there is a space that begins to be created between you and your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations. And as that space is created, then there is freedom. There is the freedom to say, I hear you, but that's fine, let go. Just as you would say, you know, your son or daughter, if it is being annoying and you are doing something else, yeah, right now I cannot pay attention to you, just be quiet. Okay, so that's more or less what we wanted to present. Now, as usual, we can do some question and answers or comments. Wait for the mic so that everybody can hear you. And yeah, is there anybody that wants to ask or contribute anything?
That quote by Nisargadatta about the natural state leading to the absence of fear and desire, that's sometimes taken as, you know, the permanent enlightenment that you're going for. But in fact, whenever you return to the natural state, in meditation or in a moment, there is no desire and fear present.
And we've all experienced courage at some point in our life, so that's what you're talking about. That's that point where fear is gone and we're able to act from there.
Yeah.
So that's the idea of practicing enlightenment.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes. That's a main problem that we have when we think of this. We think that we have to do all these things, and then the goal is far off, and there is a space between the two. But as Ed says, because this state is our natural state, then here and there we can have a taste of it. The beginning may be in some of our meditations, then it may be at some moments in life. But whenever you can get to your natural state, at that moment there is contentment, there is peace, there is lack of want, there is lack of conflict, and that is an experience you can have. With a little practice, you begin to see that, even if for a few seconds, then it begins to be more present in your awareness. So that's a very good point.
I was interested in the notion of courage, because she uses that, and I think the word courage comes from having heart, and a bit of a sacrifice of the heart, essentially. But also equating it with the notion of this natural state that we are, you know, if we open ourselves to it. But with courage, it's like we have to take it. We can't just, we open to it, but at the same time, we move with it, it seems to me. That the word courage implies a kind of taking who we are and doing something with it through the limitations of life, but there's this energy that moves.
I think courage can have a lot of synonyms. I think endurance is a good synonym for courage. It can be something that, when we hear courage, we think automatically of, the mom lifting the truck off the child, or an act of bravery. But I think it's courage that gives us the strength to do this continually day after day and failing and knowing that we didn't get it right, or it doesn't seem right, or I don't get it, or I'm struggling when I shouldn't be struggling. That's a manifestation of courage, that I don't get it, but when I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to give it another shot. So
now, when Clara Cott says that courage is a quality of our higher self, that means that is what we really are. So courage is the absence of fear. We don't need to cultivate courage in that sense. Whenever we can move away from fear, what naturally manifests is what we call courage. That is our natural state. So in the diagram, Blavatsky is saying, when we remove our identification with the body, with the frail personality, we move away from the fear, and then the natural result from that is this courage. But courage as things happen that may make us be afraid, and we are just not afraid. That is courage. And we are not afraid, because sometimes we think of courage as this self-imposed courage that is, in a sense, a mask for fear. We are afraid, and then we nevertheless try to go ahead. And that's great. That is part of fighting the fear. But I think this courage, the courage that comes from the higher self, it begins when fear disappears. And fear disappears when our identification with the frail aspect of our nature disappears.
And just to clarify, you said remove fear. I don't think we can remove fear. I think we have to remove our conscious thinking of separateness, and then the fear drops.
Yes.
But I think and I only say that because I think that's what I try to do, is I try to remove the fear, or I try to remove the anger, or I try to remove the anxiety, and it's not moving.
Yeah, because those are all effects of the cause. So what Michele is saying, if we are trying to attack the cause and the effects, then the cause remains untouched, and it keeps producing more effects. So if you just try to fight the fear, and you don't fight the sense of separateness that is the cause of the fear, then the fear will keep coming. So yeah, that is also an important point. And see that Blavatsky says that with this, all dread vanishes during the trials of life.
Dangers and trials. So yeah, which we face all the time. And so the dangers and the trials don't go away. The dangers and the trials are still there. They'll always be there. But the dread is what disappears.
Yeah, and then life, because if you see it from an objective point of view, life is an adventure of consciousness. But because we are identified with our body, emotions, we are afraid of suffering, because suffering is really hard for us to take in. But as consciousness expands and suffering begins to be just one more passing experience in consciousness, it loses that dread that produces in the lower consciousness. So then life begins to be an adventure. There are challenges, there are times of rest and joy, and if there is no fear, it's just an adventure. Of course, that's easier to say than to do, but as we lessen our self-centeredness, then that attitude, little by little, begins to be more natural.
I used to tell my kids, they would say, where are we going? Where are we going? What's it going to be like? What are we going to do? And I would say, I don't know. I've never done this before. It's an adventure. But I would tell them, if you don't like it, you don't have to do it again. I don't know if we have such a luxury to say.
Life may not give you that.
Yeah, that option there. So are there any other questions or comments? Oh, Joe has one.
So back to the one quote, from this originates a substratum of memory which does not cease in dreaming or waking. So last week, as I recall, we had talked about different states, waking, then there's sleep, and different sleep representing higher and lower levels of consciousness. So is this saying that this will start to develop a continuity of memory between higher and lower consciousness?
Yeah, exactly that. It generates a continuity. See that she talks about waking and dreaming, not the deep sleep, because the deep sleep is already a state of unity, a certain unity, in the sense that there are consciousness, but there are no objects of consciousness. So therefore, since there is not this duality, there cannot be fear or courage. But this attitude, and at the time when Blavatsky was saying this, modern psychology didn't exist. You know, Freud was born, I think, after Blavatsky was founded the TS and all that. So this idea that what you do in your waking life projects into your dreaming state wasn't so very well known. Now we are more aware of that. So that is, if you try to do it in your daily life, then it also affects the state of consciousness that is called dreaming. Now, Blavatsky even says that when you dream, you are also generating karma. What she means is not necessarily that dreams are just a psychological, re-evaluation of the day, but many times what we call dreams are actions that our consciousness is doing on the astral plane. And because consciousness is acting, it is generating karma. So in the same way, even if we don't remember it, our life, in the conscious life outside of the body, when the body is sleeping, will also be impregnated by this sense of universality. And that life is as important as the life that we are dealing in our waking state. For the most part, we don't remember it, but there is a real life when our body sleeps.